Welcome to the Spotlight On series, where we get to sit down and speak to some of the most inspirational market leaders from some of the UK's most exciting brands. We'll learn about their careers, their challenges, and their achievements, all to inspire you to help you grow your careers. Good morning, welcome to this episode of Spotlight On series. We're joined by Jenni from the Access Group, and we're here to talk all about career development. So why don't we kick things off? Jenni, tell us a little about yourself and your role.
Yeah, so I am currently the head of web experience at the Access Group. We often talk about the Access Group as being like the best kept secret in software. We are literally everywhere, like B2B software for all sorts of industries. But yeah, not many people know our names, but we are everywhere. And I head up part of the web team that looks after the SEO and the content and getting the website out there, basically.
So quite a wide remit then, I guess, in terms of what's involved.
Yeah, and it's evolved over the past 3 years that I've been there as well, because the company's evolved, the marketing team's evolved, our digital strategy has evolved, and as a result, my remit there has evolved.
What does a typical day or a week look like for Jenni in the office? I'm in the office at least like 1 day a week, so we've got like a bit of a hybrid thing going, which is quite nice. But then lots of meetings. I talk to a lot of people all the time. Yeah. Lots of presentation decks. I do a lot of presentations to like the business and the wider marketing team, and for my seniors as well to take where they need to. But yeah, most of the time, lots of meetings and helping and guiding my team through what they need to be doing to deliver in their areas. So quite a lot of, I guess, relationship building in every different part of the business.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really love about my role is how many different people I get to speak to and how many different like product areas that they work in. So I get to learn more about the business like all the time. Even though I've been there 3 years, there's always so much to learn.
So what's the sort of the marketing function, without sort of going into too much detail, sort of how big's the team and sort of the remit of?
So the overall marketing team is around about 100, 150-ish strong, I think. Wow, now. Okay. And it's UK, Romania and Australia, Singapore based. So we're kind of international
Very
now,
global,
which we weren't when I joined, and now we are. So it's what I mean by that the business is growing a lot. We've got multiple different product sets for those different industries, and then we have marketing teams for each of them, and then we also have a central function, which is where I sit, where we look after like the central digital strategy. But then people within my team sit in those product set areas. So we've got a matrix organisation, really.
So obviously large organisation. It sounds like it's scaled quite a lot over the last year. How has your role specifically changed within that sort of period of time?
Well, so when I first started, we had a really small digital team. There were only 9 of us. Now there's just over 50. So wow. Like the team has scaled massively, and yeah, there were just 9 digital people. I had there were 5 of us in my team, including myself, and we were responsible for the entire theaccessgroup.com website. And then any other migrations, so we acquire a lot of businesses, so migrations that came in as well, and then we scaled out into Australia. And as a result, our team got larger, and my remit was looking after like the web development and the SEO and content side and user experience side. So, but then as we got larger and our remit and our scale got larger, my job actually got split into 2. So the web development and operational side of things moved over to my colleague, who was doing a fantastic job there, which meant that I could focus more attention on the content strategy and the SEO. And
was that kind of your background? Was that something that you've always enjoyed, sort of more so, or is that kind of just been a bit more of a natural evolution?
I essentially got to choose, because
Nice.
I'd always, throughout my career, I've always done like web development stuff, and I'm not a developer myself, but talking to web developers and the projects related to it. And I've also always had the SEO and content side of things. When you work within a smaller business, you end up, as a digital marketing manager, for example, having a much wider remit. So I'd always done a lot of those things, and I essentially got to choose which area do I want to go into. And I was like, actually, I want I want to go more in detail in this area.
And so how kind of like important was some of the like the technical foundations? Obviously, in web side of things, you're not a programmer by trade, but how kind of important was it to understand project management and programming in general? And the same sort of question for SEO. Has that sort of supported your own growth?
It definitely has. Being able to understand even just a little bit those areas and have an interest in talking to people who understand it in detail has definitely helped. I often say I can speak developer, but I'm not a developer. Because often, like, especially when I was working in a smaller business, I was like the translator between my traditional marketing colleagues, this was a while ago, and the developers, to understand what we needed as a marketing function to then have that delivered by the developers and translate between the two. So that was really helpful. I also found that learning how to do some basic coding allowed me to understand the logic behind how the developers were doing their work, so I could understand where they were coming from, and then also my marketing background helped me understand where my marketing colleagues were coming from, so I was kind of in the middle.
So do you tend to, for anyone new coming into the industry or into the business, do you tend to sort of suggest to pick up some level of specialism within their careers? Like if you're, a recent graduate, is it kind of, best to go and start learning some programming language at the very basis, even if you're going into content or something like that? Or do you advise people to look more broadly and kind of pick things up as they're on the job, so to speak?
Yeah, I definitely recommend, and thinking about some of my colleagues within the Access Group, where we brought in some execs recently, like a cohort of execs, where we were mentoring them within the business, like nurturing that early talent. And any conversations I have with those guys is, yes, you're working in this particular area and you're learning about that, but branch out and talk to colleagues in other areas, understand what they do within their jobs, because it'll only serve you better having that knowledge. So I think if you've got an interest in coding, like, it doesn't come naturally to everybody. It's like learning another language.
Yeah, absolutely.
But understanding it to a basic point is helpful, I think.
That's cool. And I guess so something interesting you said a minute ago was sort of how the role had changed quite dramatically over the
just 3 years, yeah.
Over 3 years, and that presumably comes down to the expansion of the company you're kind of at the moment. Mm-hmm. How important has the growth of the company been on your own career development?
Oh, it's been massively important. So when I moved into the Access Group, I'd come from Experian, which was huge. And to me, I was like, when I was scoping out whether or not I wanted to join the Access Group, I was really thinking about it seriously and talking to colleagues within there, because I didn't want it to be a sidestep. I wanted it to be a progression into that. But what I came to the conclusion of, and I'm really glad that I did, was actually I'd learned so much more in this rapidly growing business than I would if I'd stayed where I was. And yeah, I'm really glad I made that leap, because that's absolutely what happened, because literally I've learned so much in being there. Every day's a school day.
Every day's a school day, which we spoke.
We have spoken about, but literally it is. Like, I'm learning so much about the business and how I interact with colleagues and how I get the best from my team, as well as like from myself and the areas that I want to develop in as well. So it's been brilliant.
I've always thought that like you can look at career progression in two different ways. It's kind of, you've got bit more of a traditional approach where you can find a big company and sort of develop personally and sort of ladder your way up, or you find a smaller company that's on a fast growth scale and actually you build a team below, or you build experience below you, and that's kind of how you can equally get that. And sometimes one can be more exciting than the other.
Absolutely. And if you were to look at my job title, it's exactly the same as it was 3 years ago. But my job is massively different, and my responsibilities that I have taken on are much more. Job title's not everything. Like, and if you were to look at it and be like, oh, well, she's doing exactly the same job as she was 3 years ago, I can tell you without a doubt I'm not.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me a little bit more about your career progression. So to date, so you've been at the Access Group for 3 years. What was your career path leading up to that moment?
So before that I was at Experian. I was there for 2 years.
In a similar role or?
A similar-ish role. So I actually took that role. It was focusing on the digital experience, like web experience side of things, because my role previous to that, I'd been a very generic digital marketing manager for a much smaller company with multiple brands in it. And I decided that I wanted to take the leap and go into a bigger company, understand more about how that works, but also be able to specialise in one of the areas that I didn't get to look at in much detail because I was so broadly stretched. So I wanted to go into the experience side of things, understand, the psychology behind why people do things that they do online and be able to explore that for a bit. So I did that at Experian, and then I was like, okay, that's great. I learnt so much about how corporations, like corporate world works in those short 2 years, which set me up really nicely for moving into the Access Group. And here I am.
Here you are now. So I guess one of the things that I spotted, or when we chatted, we kind of both landed on by accident, which is you found yourself in a sort of a marketing position that overlooks sort of multiple brands, which is, I guess anyone either moving into marketing for the first time or is within the career, you often get faced with this choice: is, do I want to go agency side, because working agency you can work with lots of brands? Do I go in-house? Obviously it has very different sort of benefits, but also within in-house you can work in these sort of big, large businesses with multiple brands. What does it take to work within a business with multiple brands and kind of having to switch between whatever mindset you need to?
It definitely takes the ability to switch on and off different hats. When I worked at the Sanderson Design Group, so much smaller company, but multiple brands, B2C, B2B for interior design type market. And I was like an internal agency. Me and my team were internal agency. We were providing the services for those brands to deliver what they needed to deliver. Same happened at Experian, really, where I was in a central function and there were multiple business units who were operating like separate businesses, and I was in the middle trying to tie them all together. And I'm there as well. At Access, there's 12 different business units, and I sit in the middle. I think it takes a certain amount of organisation to be able to,
I can imagine,
to understand what's going on, but also just that building relationships with all of your colleagues and trying to understand their motivations, their priorities, and then take a step back from a central perspective to understand, okay, so as a business, as a collective, this is what we need to do to move forward, and then be able to translate that back to my colleagues who have their kind of single targets.
So you've kind of worked from it kind of start in building a base level of technical knowledge across lots of different things, and then marrying it with personal relationships within the business environment. That's kind of...
Yeah, I think so.
Again, when we were speaking previously, one thing that was like quite apparent to me was that you were incredibly self-aware of opportunities to develop. So for you, what does personal development look like? How do you manage your own sort of progression even now when you're in sort of the role that you're in?
Personal development for me is understanding my motivations and what I want to be getting out of my career, what makes me happy and get up on a morning. Is it learning more about something that's going on in the industry, so I can have better conversations with my colleagues, which is something I do quite a lot. Hopefully if Twitter can feed me information about what's happening in SEO, that's always very helpful. But also just learning as much as I can from my colleagues and my peers. One of the areas that I've discovered that I really enjoy developing in, which is something I'm taking steps to do more of in my personal time, is the coaching and development of my team area. I think if I want to be a really good leader, then I'm learning how to have those development and coaching conversations a bit better. So I'm actually doing a course on that, which is really helpful.
So it's basically, I'm guessing quite similar. It's like
no one's ever perfect. There's always opportunities to grow regardless of where you are in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would encourage anybody to continue learning and be as hungry for knowledge as possible. And there's lots of different ways of learning. Like you can sit down and read books and do exams, or you can learn from your colleagues who've had experience in areas and shadow people and understand what's happening there. Or you can, do a more practical kind of course or something like that. It's like lots of different avenues.
Has that always been obvious to you? So for instance, speaking personally, I know that probably early on into my career, I thought I was God's gift and perfect at absolutely everything. And it was probably a few major mistakes that you suddenly realise, actually, I need to be way more aware of the areas I need to develop in. But have you kind of always been aware that there's room to progress?
I think so, but I also wouldn't rule out the fact that I might have had an air of arrogance about me in my 20s. But also, as someone who suffers quite highly with imposter syndrome, in order for me to counteract that, it's kind of feeding myself with more knowledge to keep that voice at bay and quieten that down a little bit.
Obviously, imposter syndrome is a massive one. I'm pretty sure every single person you speak to will suffer with it. And sitting down in front of cameras is probably is an interesting way. But is that kind of how you tackle it? Do you try to find those scenarios where you can tackle something head on and just kind of give things a go?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer of, if something's scary, do that first.
Yeah. Okay.
For example, when you asked me to do this, I thought about it, and a part of me wanted to run away and go, no, don't do it. But the other part of me was like, do it. Like, this is a challenge. Put yourself out your comfort zone. Just give it a go. What's the worst that can happen?
Thank God you did, because this is a great interview so far. The other things we spoke about, which was really interesting. So quite early on into your career, you started line managing and started building a team. How important is that to you personally, and how important is to that for anyone in a career looking to kind of maybe climb up the ranks through a marketing role?
It's a good question, because it's not something that everyone aspires to, and I think it's important to recognise that that path isn't for everybody, but for some people it is what they want to do. I don't think I'd really thought about it when it happened. It just, for the fact that I had so much work to do and I was the only person in that area, I had to bring someone in to help, and then all of a sudden I became a line manager. And I didn't have any support or any training in that area. I was kind of figuring it out as I went. And it's interesting because I've talked to some of my friends and colleagues, and they've had similar experiences. So it's like, you're not on your own if that does happen to you. But also, it's it doesn't come naturally to everyone, but at the same time, it's something you can definitely work on. And
so for those people wanting to kind of progress and build teams and stuff, what are the steps that you can take early on before you even have a team to manage to help either build your confidence or build your skill set so that you can do that when the opportunity arrives?
Conversation I've had with some of my team members recently is, you don't have to be a line manager in the traditional sense to be a leader. So you can show leadership in your area by talking to your peers and guiding them, or elsewhere in the business. I think it's about like creating your network in whatever business you're in and showing your expertise and your human side to help people through their whatever challenges they're facing in an area that you might be able to help in, and show leadership in that way, which will set you up in a really good place for when you do have people reporting into you to be a good leader in that sense, and set you up for success.
The thing I always remember as well is I remember when you first sort of picked up some line management responsibility, and again that kind of imposter syndrome sits in. You're like, oh God, you've got to be better than them at everything. And actually you very quickly realise that everyone has different strengths, and the moment that you treat a sort of even a line management scenario as a partnership and lean on them for their expertise, and you can kind of pick up the bits that you're good at, that for me is something that's always been quite poignant and has led to a scenario where you can work with multiple different people and start picking up those sort of line management responsibilities.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree, because what I've learned as I've built my team, so it started as 5 including me, now it's 16. Wow. And I've hired that entire team. I've hired people who know things about things that I don't know about, and I know that I can go to them and I can learn from them, and we all learn from each other, and hopefully I've created a culture within my team where everyone's learning from each other, and I've I've hired with lots of different skill sets and experiences to mean that together they're a super team.
Yeah.
And they're amazing.
Yeah.
And but also I think encouraging the people that are in your team to challenge you the way that you challenge them. It should be a reciprocal relationship there, because at the end of the day we're all people.
all in it for the similar reasons. It doesn't matter at what point you're in your career, right?
Yeah. Just because I'm the boss, it doesn't mean that I know everything and I'm right 100% of the time. Like, challenge me.
I very quickly learned that I'm very, very rarely right. So leaning on everyone else is very important. So no, thank you so much for joining us. That's been really insightful and really useful. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. For more content like this, don't forget to sign up to our newsletter, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on social.